On the 7th of October 2001, US Air Force pilot Captain Scott Swanson took part in the opening day of Operation Enduring Freedom. That first night marked the beginning of a joint American and British bombing campaign against Taliban forces. One of the most high-profile targets was Taliban leader Mullah Omar, and it was Captain Swanson's job to take him out. Scott watched as Mullah Omar went into a mosque. Not willing to endanger civilian lives, the attack was called off. However, Scott was given permission to strike some nearby security guards in the hope that the attack would flush Omar out of the building. Scott said the pilot's prayer, squeezed the trigger, and watched the hellfire hit exactly where he'd aimed for. While the attack had failed to kill Mullah Omar, it was historic for other reasons. That evening, pilot Scott Swanson didn't fire the Hellfire missile from inside the aircraft, but from a trailer outside of Washington, D.C. This would be the first time a missile had been fired from a drone in combat. This is the MQ-1 Predator. Unmanned aerial vehicles, or UAVs, are aircraft with no onboard crew or passengers. They can be automated drones or remotely piloted vehicles, otherwise known as RPVs. UAVs can fly for long periods of time at a controlled level of speed and height, and most importantly, they avoid putting aircrew in the direct line of fire. Entering combat on the eve of the War on Terror, the MQ-1 Predator was a new aircraft for a new age of irregular warfare. But it also fitted with the principle of precision warfare that had been entrenched in US military doctrine since the interwar years. For the first time, operators could stalk and efficiently kill an enemy on the other side of the globe, with no risk to American lives. As the first combat-proven RPV, the MQ-1 changed what it means to fight an air war. And in doing so, the Predator has helped to redefine the airspace of the future. This MQ-1B Predator, which is on display in the American Air Museum here at Duxford, served with 57th Wing in Afghanistan between 2005 and 2008. During this time, it flew nearly 5,000 hours in 288 individual sorties. We're currently working on a new showcase that will tell the story of one of the pilots who operated Predators in Afghanistan. Lieutenant Cl Kristen Heiserman began flying surveillance missions with the MQ-1B in 2012 as part of Air Force Special Operations Command. It's great to have these objects here. It's amazing that you were able to bring them here yourself and also get to have a look around the museum.
Yeah.
And so it gives us a chance, which we don't usually get, to actually go and have a look at the objects, and you can tell us some stories from your time with the MQ-1. So what are some of the differences between flying a drone and a manned aircraft?
Yeah, I did learn quickly that there was some major differences. A manned aircraft, you're in a 3D environment. You have that, you can smell the engine and the fuel. You can feel the air rushing in. You can feel the vibrations of your plane to help you know if there's something wrong with your aircraft or it's operating correctly. In the MQ-1, you just don't have that kind of input, so you're relying solely on your eyes. So just using that 2D environment and to trust all the digital gauges that you have instead of like steam gauges or looking outside the window, for instance.
In the early 1960s, the only spy plane at the disposal of the US government was the U-2. While an excellent reconnaissance aircraft, the capture and interrogation of U-2 pilot Gary Powers by the Soviets in 1960 had highlighted the benefits of an unmanned spy plane. The Air Force's rapid procurement program, Big Safari, invested money in the development of remotely piloted reconnaissance aircraft. The Ryan Model 147, nicknamed Lightning Bug, was a result of these early experiments. First flown operationally in 1964, the Lightning Bug operated extensively in Vietnam, where it had an average lifespan of just 4 missions. While the use avoided human loss, such a high turnover of machines was deemed unsustainable by the USAF. As a result, the US government pulled funding for remotely piloted aircraft, putting a temporary end to the US military's development of UAVs. But that didn't stop a young Israeli engineer named Abraham Karem from developing his own remotely piloted vehicles. Working from his garage in California, Karem set out to design an RPV with a long loiter time that could provide real-time intelligence in difficult or high-risk environments where manned aircraft might not be feasible. He went to work on a prototype, which he named the Albatross. The Albatross, later renamed Amber, had a high aspect ratio wing and high fuel ratio for endurance, a satellite dish in the nose for navigation, and a go-kart motor and propeller to get it off the ground. What was so incredible about this lightweight UAV was that it could spend up to 56 hours in the air without refueling. This impressive drone caught the attention of the US Army and Navy, who funded further developments. Amber would eventually develop into the Gnat. But when Congress slashed the budget for RPVs in 1987, Karem and his Gnats were caught in the crossfire. His company went bankrupt, and the prototypes were mothballed in the desert in 1990. That was until General Atomics swooped in to purchase them, employing Karem to help develop the Gnat into a new UAV, the Predator. By 1993, the CIA and Air Force were frustrated with the grainy imagery from satellites passing over Bosnia. Seeing a potential solution in the Predator, the Air Force awarded General Atomics a contract to develop the aircraft under the name RQ-1. The R designation stood for reconnaissance and the Q for unmanned aircraft. The RQ-1 Predator's first operational use came in July 1995, with a deployment to Albania, under the command of the 11th Reconnaissance Squadron, the first dedicated Predator unit. For the first time, intelligence analysts were able to see real-time video of targets. During the Bosnian War, a Predator was able to confirm that Serbian guns had not been withdrawn from Sarajevo, as promised, allowing US commanders to take immediate action. As an aircraft, the Predator is never going to win any beauty contests. More closely resembling a glider than a powered aircraft, it has long, thin wings that stretch 55 feet from tip to tip, but its gangly appearance is for good reason, helping the Predator to achieve a range of 770 miles. Constructed of lightweight graphite epoxy, the Predator weighs in at just over 500 kilos or 1,100 pounds. That's less than an economy car.
So what is the Predator's capabilities and what might surprise people about the platform?
So it's a relatively low-cost platform. So in total, it's about $4 million to build. And the majority of that value is in the MTS ball, or the sensor that we have on the bottom. And so that's the most expensive part. And I think they really capitalized on that and saved money on the rest of it because it's a very lightweight aircraft. We had these things on the back that they were rudder vaders. And so they were at a 45-degree angle down to the ground from the aircraft. Those are very easy to scrape when landing. So the landings were quite difficult. We did have retractable gear. So when you have retractable gear, that allows you to, 1, fly faster, and 2, not burn so much gas. The Predator can be up for around 19 hours. It can fly up to about 22,000 feet, give or take a few thousand. And it has a 4-cylinder Rotax engine and with 2 blades, which is a very, very weak engine. But when you put a turbocharger on it, it makes it a lot more powerful and being able to go above like that 10,000 feet mark. So while it was a very small aircraft, I would say that it carried quite a punch when it had to.
The aircraft is part of a much larger remotely piloted aircraft system. The operators responsible for flying the mission are based in a ground control station, typically in the United States, and fly the Predator via a satellite data link. The basic crew for the Predator is a pilot who controls the aircraft and commands the mission, and an enlisted crew member to operate sensors and weapons. Behind them sits a mission coordinator who is on hand to assist the pilot. A launch and recovery element is also deployed to execute takeoff and landing operations via a line-of-sight data link. This remote split operation allows Predators to deploy a much smaller number of personnel to a forward location. It also means that drones deployed to different regions can be controlled from one stateside ground control station.
Not many people realise that actually you can have an operator operating a drone from the US, but then you've also got guys on the ground.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, so the reason why we even have a job downrange is because there is a 2-second delay on the satellite link. And so that's enough of a delay for when you're trying to put in those small little inputs to land a plane, because it's very technical when you're trying to land a plane especially, but also when you're trying to take it off. So downrange, we have a line of sight link antenna, and that's what we launch with and land with. And then when it's at a safe altitude and a safe area, then we hand the drone over to the stateside crew via the satellite link, and that's what they do. And then when they've reached their time on station or they're getting low on gas, then they come home and we grab them with that line of sight antenna, and then we land the aircraft. A really interesting part about flying any drone, and although this is not all about Afghanistan, you could be flying in Afghanistan one moment, your plane lands, but you're still on shift. So then you need to go take over for somebody else, and you're flying in Yemen. Yeah, right.
So you've got to suddenly understand that situation in the new zone, combat zone you're in.
Exactly. And each area, each combat zone, every area of responsibility is a different set of rules of engagement. And so you have to know all the rules in each AOR so that you don't cause an international incident.
During its early years of service, the pioneering Predator units were often forced to improvise and adapt. And it was during this time that the Predator's potential as an attack aircraft was first considered. In March 1999, with the NATO bombing of Yugoslavia just beginning, there was a need for an aircraft that could fly below the cloud deck and designate targets. Big Safari engineers set to work to install laser designation equipment to the nose of the RQ-1. A few weeks later, Predator pilots were designating targets for A-10s to drop laser-guided bombs. But it was in Afghanistan the following year that the need for a strike-capable UAV became glaringly apparent. Over the next year, the race to arm the Predator accelerated. The AGM-114 Hellfire, a missile more commonly found on helicopters, was chosen as the preferred armament. The Predator would be equipped with 2 of these laser-guided missiles, as well as a multi-spectral targeting system. Initial concerns that such a powerful weapon would be too much for the light airframe proved unfounded, and testing was all but completed when the events of September the 11th changed everything. Within days, the first armed Predators had been shipped to Afghanistan, beginning 13 years of service in the country.
So this is the uniform that you would have worn in Afghanistan. Can you talk us through it?
Yeah. So in Afghanistan, I was a captain. So this is a reflection of my time as a captain. And I'll start with the boots here. So these are considered flight boots, so they're flight certified. The reason why you have to have flight certified boots is because they're fire retardant. So you have to wear a special kind of boot in order to fly. So these were my flight boots. And when I look at these, although they look pretty good right now, these have stepped down on very many different kinds of soil, right? They've been to Africa many times. They've been to Afghanistan a few times and been to Iraq. So these boots have been with me through thick and thin. So and they're very comfortable, by the way. This is the patrol cap. So this has the captain's rank on it, and my last name Heiserman on the back. But any pictures that you would see from downrange, we typically don't even wear them because you're constantly around airplanes, and when you're on the flight line or you're near that, they don't want any foreign objects, right? So you take your hat off, you put it in your pocket, and that's kind of where it remained almost the whole time.
How important were drones in Afghanistan?
The beginning of the Afghanistan conflict was really waged by drones. That was when they came online. They started this new environment, right? That everybody had to get used to. That this was happening. This was going to be a thing. There was irregular warfare going on, and that's what they were primarily used for, is to keep that 24-hour watch, that eye in the sky, so that we could pretty much know everything that was going on, to be able to connect the dots with the Taliban or Al-Qaeda or ISIS. So at any given point, I could say that there's probably 20 Predators up at once.
In the years that followed, the MQ-1 Predator supported counter-terrorism and counterinsurgency operations by conducting intelligence, reconnaissance, dynamic targeting strikes, and close air support of troops in contact. Since the mid-1990s, Predators have been flown in the Balkans, Afghanistan, Iraq, Libya, and other global territories by pilots in remote locations. But despite the physical distance between the operators and the battlefields, concerns have increasingly been raised around the psychological impacts of operating drones.
I think that's something that's maybe not as appreciated as much with aircraft like the Predator, the actual amount of effort that goes into flying these things, and also the psychological toll that can take on people. Did you experience that firsthand yourself, like the emotional toll of flying drones?
Yes. I would say it was a very hard transition to be flying stateside, and then 15 minutes later, I've driven home, and I'm now adjusted to real life, and something, amazing or incredible had just happened, and I can't talk about it to anybody just because of the classification. There was a mission that I was a part of that I watched Chinook go down, and I wasn't able to tell anybody when I got home that I witnessed that. Years later, I was able to obviously say that I did, but it was a very hard transition to go from flying stateside to home. However, when I did the launch and recovery elements, I prefer that because you were able to kind of keep what happened downrange. And so you would have enough time to transition from that to being home.
Yeah.
So I think that was a little bit better on the psyche.
The use of UAVs like this MQ-1 has also prompted debate around the ethics of drone warfare. What are the moral implications of carrying out drone strikes from the other side of the world? Who makes decisions about who the targets will be and whether to execute a strike? And who should be held accountable if they go wrong? US drone policy emphasises the humane efficiency of precision targeting and the stringent procedures that are in place to limit collateral damage. However, there's little denying that the persistent presence of an eye in the sky has psychological impacts for those on the ground. Psychiatrists have diagnosed many patients in these areas with anticipatory anxiety, defined as a constant fear that they might come under attack.
We took the collateral damage very seriously, and we had people who were collateral damage or CDE, collateral damage estimate, certified. And so they would know exactly what the impact would mean for its surroundings. And so if we were following a vehicle and you wanted to ensure that that vehicle wasn't going to drive into a village while the missile's in the air, you would have another Predator or a Reaper looking ahead of the vehicle for you to let the CDE person know exactly what they were getting themselves into. And also look behind the vehicle if anybody was coming up, trying to pass the vehicle or something like that.
So it's a quite sensitive technology at that time.
Exactly. So if any drone, we knew that it wouldn't make it back home, we would, and if we had the ability to do so, that we would purposely crash it and crash it hard. And if it didn't pretty much disintegrate, which was usually the case, then other RPA would come in and shoot a missile at it to destroy it so that nothing could be recovered.
Despite the ethical questions surrounding military drones, their use is only increasing. Today, there are more US Air Force pilots training to fly drones than manned aircraft. While the Predator was retired by the USAF in 2018, its successor, the MQ-9 Reaper, continues to serve with the US Air Force. The larger Reaper can carry 8 laser-guided Hellfire missiles, 4 times that of the Predator. The MQ-9 has also been modified for extended range operations through the addition of external fuel tanks that give the Reaper a range of 1,150 miles and endurance of 36 hours. But the Predator lives on under the guise of the MQ-1C Grey Eagle.
So I'll talk about my grandma and grandpa. This day is a special day. This is the day that they got married. So they were in Calcutta, and they at first were not allowed to marry. So General Stilwell would not allow them to marry. Eventually, a new general came into that position, and they said, yes, you're allowed to get married. So they got married in Calcutta, but the really funny part was that my grandpa flew the B-25. He was a Burma bridge buster. So they flew his B-25 to Delhi and dropped them off so they could go on their honeymoon. To my left, you can see my husband and I. So my husband, Chris Heiserman, he's also a pilot in the Air Force. So we tried to recreate the same photo of my grandparents. We had just gotten our wings. We were pretty new to the wings. So at our wedding, you know how sometimes you do the dance where the last couple standing, the one that's been married the longest gets a prize.
Okay.
So at our wedding, we knew that they were going to win, and so this was their consolation prize. So they got to have a picture frame of their own. So in 2014 was my deployment to Kandahar, and that was the last year that they flew the MQ-1 Predator, at least from the Air Force Special Operations. So I closed down AVSOC in Afghanistan. I was the very last AVSOC pilot for MQ-1s. So that's when it started to wind down, and they started the transition to MQ-9s, and I was asked, do you want to transition to MQ-9s or go to a manned aircraft? And I opted to go to the manned aircraft because my husband was flying a manned aircraft.
Thank you so much for coming over to Duxford and bringing your amazing collection of objects and for sharing your memories. How does it feel now to be going home and leaving these here with us?
I think it's an incredible opportunity, and I'm so thankful that you found me on this podcast that I did. I would say this is a great way to honor the people that I was deployed with, and also the people that deployed before me and after me, and it's much better use of these items here than stuffed away in my closet. So I am excited that maybe one day my children will come back here and be able to potentially see this as an exhibit.
Be here.